So briefly explaining a bit of the organizational context. Actually, to react to the previous speaker, in many countries in Latin America where now is the majority of progressive governments, the people in power do not call themselves political parties anymore. There are civic movements. There is a civic coalition in Ecuador. There is a social movement in Bolivia. So there is a kind of rejection, actually, of political parties in that part of the world because they're seen as part of the old world and part of a kind of interest-based politics. So another thing about Ecuador, it's still pretty much, despite the reforms that have been going in the last 10 years, it's still pretty much objectively a neo-colonial economy, meaning they export raw materials. That works well because of the Chinese economy. At the same time, it is structurally weak because they have to import high value-added consumption and production goods from abroad. So this is a kind of a problem that they are facing in the long term. How do they get out of this dependency? And the president, Rafael Correa, who is married with a Belgian, that's a little anecdote, has declared some time ago that he wants Ecuador to be an open knowledge, commons-based society. And I've been lucky enough to be called in as research director. So this is the process very briefly. We have 5 areas of change that we are going to study. Human capabilities, how do people learn to share and to cooperate and create commons together. Productive matrix. For example, the farmers in Ecuador use mostly still traditional farming, very productive in terms of nutrition, very weak in terms of the economy. Can we help a neo-traditional economy to emerge in Ecuador with appropriate technology, but nobody is making those technologies? So could we, for example, instead of relying on agribusiness, which is not interested in that economy, could we develop an open agricultural machining commons, where a global community of engineers would work together on developing these type of machines, which could then be made in microfactories? So that's the general idea. The third one is institutional innovation. Open technological infrastructure is the fourth one, and physical commons about housing and transportation is number 5. And this is organized by the Ministry of Knowledge and Talent, the Planning Office, which belongs to the university, to the ministry, and I work more specifically for the Advanced Studies Institute, which has a contract with the planning, so it's a bit complicated as usual. And so this is the process. We are researching until February. We will hire 20 Ecuadorian and global researchers. They will produce 10 policy documents, and then we'll have an open source conference in March with the president, national members of the National Assembly, civic organizations, and the 20 foreign experts to modify eventually these documents and present them to the National Assembly. So what I briefly want to explain is the framing of this project. This is a bit the critique that I would have on the proceedings here. My thesis is very short. Yes, we have democracy in politics, relatively speaking, but as soon as we start to work, we're in a feudal hierarchical relationship most of the time. And so if we look at how value is created, we create value as a private person, we rent out our labor, this is then captured in the market, and frankly, civil society, in my vision, is a bit the rest category. It's what we do when we are tired and we come home. And we see that in our language, right? We talk about non-profits as if profits was first, and we talk about non-governmental as if government was first. So the vision in Ecuador is based on the fact that we see an emerging mode of production, which we call commons-oriented peer production. And basically the logic there, let me first explain its pure logic, and then I'll go back to it, how it actually expresses itself. So if you look at open knowledge like Wikipedia, you look at free software like Linux, you look at open source cars like Wikispeed, open satellites like Ardusat, there is something common, and it's quite different in terms of value creation than how we do it today. So these systems are based on contributions. People create a common pool of knowledge, code or design. So the value, the use value is deposited in a common pool. Around that common pool, you see an entrepreneurial coalition, right? So you think about the Linux economy. There's an interesting report in the US called the Fair Use Economy, which estimates the open knowledge economy to be 1/6 of GDP. The entrepreneurial coalitions are companies that create value on top of the commons. Typically, a for-profit company traditionally would actually destroy the commons and enclose the commons. But now we have these paradoxical situations where, let's say, a company like IBM actually co-creates and co-produces the Linux commons along with the contributory community. But this is just to say that the value is deposited in the commons, the use value and then there is a market economy that goes around it. Now, most of these projects have a for-benefit association. Think about Wikipedia and the Wikimedia Foundation. The Wikimedia Foundation enables and empowers the cooperation to continue, right? So they do not command and control the production of Wikipedia, but they make it possible. And most of these projects have foundations, whether it's the Linux Foundation, the Apache Foundation, GNOME Foundation, Bitcoin Foundation, etc. So they are governed by these for-benefit associations. So the leap of faith that we are making is that this emerging mode of value creation is also the shape of a common economy and of a common political and economic system. This is the thesis that we defend. And therefore what we do is we go from the microeconomy, where this is already operating, to the macroeconomy. So how would a society look like that would actually operate as we see operating in the emergent mode of commons-oriented peer production? Well, basically, the society would be centered around civil society, which has become productive. Contributors, as citizens, are creating common value together in many, many fields. And we have seen this today and yesterday. In many talks, we see this modality operating, open input, participatory process, and then something is made which is universally made available to the community, right? Then we would have a market space. Now, what we try to do in Ecuador is to develop an ethical economy, a solidarity economy. So what's the difference? Well, think about the Wikispeed open source car. This is a car that was designed in 3 months with 80 people in a dozen countries, where they actually design a new car every week, as opposed to Detroit, which needs 5 years to integrate an innovation. So they have a new car every year, but innovation is the one that was done 5 years ago. The Wikispeed car is designed for a microfactory system. So basically, they use a method of design called extreme manufacturing, very rapid iterative development. It's organized modularly, so any car engineer in the world can contribute to the knowledge commons of Wikispeed. And then, very interestingly, the mode of production, the physical mode of production, is also based on distributed means of production. It's based on the idea of having microfactories where you can, using a combination of 3D printing machines as a kind of assembly, if you like, a mini assembly, you can reassemble as a Lego the car and make it locally, right? So this is interesting for a country, for example, like Ecuador, which lacks a number of industries. And now here's the problem. Wikispeed doesn't find investors. Why not? Because capital doesn't want to invest in intellectual property-free knowledge. Because the economy today is not based on production, it's based on financialization. So we need other forms of economies that can work with this, this kind of system. And then regarding the state, if you look at the for-benefit association, what they do, we come to the concept of a partner state. What is a partner state? A partner state is a state form that enables and empowers autonomous social production. So a bit what you did, I think it's Frank, right? A bit what Frank did with the Burning Man thing, what was the name? The local festival. What you did, that was that, right? You enabled and empowered the autonomy of the civic field to actually produce something. So it's not privatization, it's not centralization, it's something helping civil society do things by themselves, right? So, sorry, this is so the notion of the partner state, and we also use notions like the commonification of public services, public commons partnerships, instead of public-private partnerships, to express this attitude. Now, just to go back, and let me see if I can do this. Can I go back? Yes. We do have a problem, right? I mean, peer production is hyper-productive. Whenever you see an economic sector where this kind of open ecosystem enters, the proprietary alternatives start to lose their dominance. Right now we have the paradox, which is that capital is much more eager to invest in peer production than alternatives. And the problem with that is that thing about crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is great, right? You expand the input of knowledge and expertise outside of your in-group. So you have more innovation. But in these forms of disaggregated input from the outside, what we get is a minimum wage that is $2 an hour. So the average wage of crowdsourced labor is 1/5 in the US of the minimum wage. So within conditions of financial capital, this is a problem. And of course, this is one to avoid. Okay, I very quick, because I know So this is the blueprint of what we're trying to do. So imagine a society where every sector would be governed, if you like, would be produced by an open commons, right? So you have an open education commons, you have an open science commons, you have an open agricultural machining commons, you have a seed commons, you have open industrial sector commons. If you want this, you need feeding mechanisms, right? You can't have an open education commons if you don't have open textbooks and open courseware, right? So if you want to implement this vision, we need legislation, we need regulations that actually allow this to happen in Ecuadorian society. So how do we do that, right? Just to give you a little anecdote, the textbooks in school cost $70. They change every year, 2-3 lines, and the students have to buy a new one. Now, the indigenous people can't afford it, but they still buy it because of social status, right? So if they actually come to school with the older version, people look down on them, they don't want this. So even the people without money are really impoverishing themselves buying these proprietary textbooks, right? So you need open textbooks. You need open courseware and stuff like that. If you want an open science commons, you need open access publishing rules, right? If you need a civic commons, you need open government data. So I think you get the idea, right? So we're working on what kind of feeding mechanism do we need to develop in order to get such a commons-based society. Then we need material and immaterial infrastructures. Very briefly, I'll give you an example of each. We need an Internet of Energy. Like Jeremy Rifkin, based same idea. We want to empower people to produce as much as they can their own energy on the local and neighborhood level. And for that, you need a smart grid. Just an example, in Bangladesh, there's many villages now where you can see solar panels, but there's no grid, right? So you also need a smart grid that would allow this kind of bottom-up exchange and sharing of energy production. If you want to make these open agricultural machines, you need microfactories, you need hacker spaces, you need maker spaces, you need co-working spaces. So this is kind of the physical infrastructure. Now, let you give me one example of, 2 examples maybe of immaterial infrastructures. If capital doesn't want to invest in a project like Wikispeed, which is 5 times as fuel efficient as an industrial car, so this is a crime, basically. Continuing to make cars which are 5 times as polluting, when you have a car that's only 1/5 as polluting, this is a problem, right? Especially in our type of society where we have ecological problems. So how do you get investment? So we talk about open venture funding. Funding mechanism, we can actually allow this kind of investment to take place. Open value accounting is if you have an open contributory system and you want to avoid the few people capture the value and market that value, right? So you have everybody contributing to a common pool, but then only a few people, a few big companies may be capturing that value. Think about Facebook. 100% of the value comes from us. An empty platform is valueless, but we don't get any exchange value from Facebook, right? Facebook captures 100% of the exchange value. So it's time to stop. Open value accounting is a method or different methods that are experimented with to actually measure and reward contributions rather than labor and capital. So this is what we're working on. So what does it have to do with democracy? Well, I'll come back to the original idea. 3 players, right? The first player is the community. The community of contributors is not democratic. It's based on open allocation, self-aggregation. So this is freedom. It's an enormous increase in freedom if you have a system where people can choose their own task, choose their own jobs. So this is, I think, a civilizational advance if we can realize this on a wider scale. The ethical economy. So if we have a system which privileges the creation of new types of actors, and one of the, just to give you an example, what I like is solidarity co-ops. It's a new form of co-ops that move from single stakeholder management to multi-stakeholder management. So you don't have workers co-ops and consumer co-ops fighting each other. You have, like in Italy, social care co-ops, which are funded by the government, but they are managed by the user communities, the nurses, the doctors, the hospitals, etc. So multi-stakeholder governance, and in Canada, 98% of the new co-ops are solidarity co-ops. In South America, many governments have these type of legislations already. If you think about Brazil, they have a law on the solidarity economy, they have a law on complementary currencies, so they are enabling this type of economy to emerge. So the second thing is, in terms of democracy, is that we have more democratic market entities, right? Now imagine, and this is happening, I don't have time to give you examples. Okay, I'm wrapping up. This is a little coffee company. This little coffee company wanted to make good coffee without exploiting the workers and making a living from it. So this is what they do. Open logistics, open accounting, open research, crowd-funded retail expansion, and they hacked the Nespresso machine on top of it. You can see this is something new. This is a new way of doing things. Now I really conclude with a little historical comparison. In 1973, a little bit before, there's a fantastic book called Red Plenty, and most of you may not know that the Russians actually invented the internet, but read Red Plenty, you will know that the Russians invented the internet, and then they killed it. And the book is about a debate in the 60s inside the Communist Party of the Soviet Union about how to plan more efficiently. And of course, then they invented this system, but it dramatically undercut the hierarchy, and so they said, okay, we'll kill it. In the 70s, when Allende came to power, he talked with Stafford Beer, a leading complexity theorist, and they created CyberSyn. The first thing Pinochet did was not sending his bombers to the palace, it was bombing CyberSyn. CyberSyn was a system for open, democratic, participatory planning. Didn't work, didn't have time to work. So what we're doing in Ecuador, if you like, is taking up the thread. Because imagine this, if you have an open commons, and you have an ethical coalition working around it, it's very easy for them to practice open accounting and open logistics. And so pragmatically creating a system of mutual coordination. This is not planning and this is not a market, this is a new system. So what I'm suggesting, and I'm stopping, is that instead of looking at lib-lab, right, this is the industrial system, we privatize or we regulate, state or private, that we think in a triarchical way. We have the state, we have civic society with the commons, and we have the market with an ethical economy. And we need to change all three at the same time. And this will create a new democracy. So we can't just talk about democracy and ignoring the fact that our state has been captured by financial interests. We have to do something structurally about that. We can't talk about democracy isolated from the situation in which democracy actually operates. Thank you.